She looked at me across the candlelit table and whispered, "Maybe we could have a second chance." I smiled, slow, steady, unshaken. "You left when I was at my worst," I said. "Not because I failed, but because I stopped being convenient." She didn't respond. She didn't have to, because in that moment, she finally understood. The life she walked away from had become everything she'd ever wanted, and it no longer had room for her. I remember the night I proposed to her like it happened yesterday. We were sitting on a faded bench in the park near my tiny apartment. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even particularly comfortable. The ring I gave her cost $120. I'd saved for it for almost 4 months, cutting corners, skipping meals, walking to work so I wouldn't have to pay for gas. I wanted to give her something better, but I just couldn't. Not yet. Still, when I got down on one knee and opened that small velvet box, her face lit up. She said yes, without hesitation. Tears in her eyes, arms wrapped around my neck like I'd given her the world. That moment, I believed we were unbreakable. Back then, I had a job that paid enough to survive, and a dream I couldn't stop thinking about. A startup idea that had lived in the back of my head for years. I didn't talk about it much, just scribbled ideas late at night after work. She knew about it. She even encouraged me to keep writing things down, to keep the dream alive for someday. We talked about our future in tiny apartments and coffee shops. She wanted a small wedding with close friends, a house with a garden, maybe 2 kids and a rescue dog. I wanted to build something of my own, something no one could take from me. She told me she didn't care about money, only that we loved each other, only that we had each other, and I believed her. I wasn't blind. I knew our lives weren't easy. My car broke down constantly. The water heater in my apartment made terrifying noises. We counted coins before going to the grocery store, but we laughed through it. She used to say, "We'll look back on these days and smile." I thought we were building something that couldn't be broken by a bad month or a missed paycheck. But maybe I was just building blind. A few months after the proposal, things started to shift. It wasn't sudden, not a crash, just small fractures. The way she sighed when we passed a nicer restaurant. The way she paused longer when her friends showed off their new engagement rings. The way she started responding, "I'm fine," when I asked what was wrong, instead of just saying it outright. I told myself it was stress, planning a wedding, working extra shifts, maybe just the weight of 2 people trying to make a life with. Nothing but love and coffee. I offered to postpone the wedding until I had more stability, but she said no. She said everything was fine, but it wasn't. I didn't know it then, but the countdown had already started. At work, rumors of downsizing were spreading like wildfire. I tried to ignore them, focused on my performance, my numbers, my discipline. But none of that mattered. One rainy Monday morning, my manager called me in, closed the door, and said the words I never thought I'd hear. "We're letting you go." No warning, no severance, just a box and a forced smile. When I told her that night, she sat in silence for what felt like an hour. Then she said, "So, what now?" I told her I had some savings and I'd start applying for jobs right away. I even hinted at the idea I'd been building. Maybe now was the time to go for it, to finally take the risk and make it real. She didn't respond. She didn't hold me. She just nodded once, then turned to scroll through her phone. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I should have seen it sooner. The signs were all there. But love has a funny way of blinding you to what's right in front of your face. We slept in the same bed that night, but I've never felt further from another human being. I lay awake, listening to her breathe, wondering if she was dreaming of a life that didn't include me anymore. A few days later, I got my answer. A few days after I lost my job, the silence between us grew heavier, more loaded, more tense. She still came home, still cooked sometimes, still kissed me goodnight. But it was different. Her kisses became brief, distracted. Her smiles felt rehearsed. And her patience, what little of it remained, was thinning fast. I doubled down on job applications. I sent out dozens of resumes, followed up with every lead, accepted 2 interviews that felt beneath my qualifications. No callbacks, no offers, just polite rejection emails, if I was lucky enough to get a response at all. Meanwhile, the bills didn't stop, and neither did her sighs. The woman who once held my hand while we split bills down to the cent now looked at me like I was a burden she didn't sign up for. She stopped making little jokes at dinner, stopped reaching out for me in the middle of the night. And worst of all, she stopped talking about the wedding. It became the elephant in every room we entered together. Every time I brought it up, she'd wave it off with a vague excuse. We'll figure it out. I just don't feel like planning right now. We're in a weird place financially. It's not the right time. At first, I agreed. It made sense. But somewhere in those excuses, I stopped hearing hesitation and started hearing exit plans. One night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She thought I was asleep. I just don't know if I can do this anymore, she whispered. It's like he's stuck. I can't build a future on dreams and broken promises. I didn't say anything the next morning. I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard it. Maybe part of me still hoped she was just venting, just overwhelmed. But the next few days proved otherwise. She started staying out later, always running errands, or grabbing drinks with co-workers. Her texts became cold, mechanical. No more hearts, no more "I miss yous." Just "okay" or "be there soon." Then came the moment that finally shattered the illusion. It was a Friday evening. I had just come home from a freelance gig that barely paid gas money. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop, scrolling through something, probably wedding blogs or social media feeds filled with couples who weren't us. I dropped my keys on the counter and said, as casually as I could, I was thinking we could have a quiet weekend together. Just us. Maybe walk in the park again, like we used to. She didn't even look up. I can't, she said flatly. I'm going to a friend's cabin this weekend. Which friend? I asked. Just friends, she said. You don't know them. It was the first time she lied to my face and didn't even bother hiding it. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded and walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat there, staring at the wall. The woman I was going to marry was slowly erasing me from her life, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. She left the next morning with a small bag and a tired expression. Didn't even kiss me goodbye. I stood at the window and watched her get into an Uber, heart pounding, stomach twisted. I wasn't sure if she'd be back. I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be. And then, 3 days later, she gave me my answer. 3 days passed. No calls, no texts, just silence. By the time Sunday night rolled around, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't the type to obsess, but I wasn't blind either. I knew her patterns. I knew her routines. And this wasn't her just needing space. I sat on the couch staring at my phone, refreshing my messages like maybe she had texted, and I just missed it somehow, but the screen stayed empty. Just the same bland wallpaper and the time ticking forward too slowly to feel real. She came home late that night, closer to midnight than evening. I heard her keys in the lock, the hesitant creak of the door opening like she was sneaking into a house she didn't live in anymore. When I looked up, she was already halfway into the hallway, holding her small overnight bag and looking everywhere except at me. Hey, I said quietly, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. She barely glanced at me. Hey, she walked straight into the bedroom without a hug, without a kiss, without even asking how my weekend was. I followed her, heart racing. I didn't want to confront her, but I also couldn't pretend nothing was wrong. Can we talk? I asked. She sighed, that same tired, irritated sigh she'd been using for weeks. What do you want me to say? She asked, still not looking at me. Where were you? I said, a little sharper than I intended. She tossed her bag on the floor and finally met my eyes. I was thinking, about what? About us. There it was, the phrase that signaled every relationship's breaking point. I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to get too close. And? I asked. She crossed her arms, leaned against the wall, and said it, calm, emotionless, like she was reading from a script. I don't think I can do this anymore. Silence. I stared at her, waiting for something, regret, hesitation, even a flicker of pain. But there was nothing. Her face was blank, cold, distant, like I was a stranger she just happened to share rent with. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What happened? You know what happened, she said. This life, it's not what I signed up for. I feel stuck, like I'm wasting my time, waiting for a future that keeps getting further away. I'm trying, I said. I'm doing everything I can. You said you believed in me. She laughed under her breath. Not loud, not cruel, but just enough to hurt. I believed in you when I thought it was temporary. When I thought you'd bounce back, but it's been months. You're still unemployed. You talk about that business idea, but there's no money, no progress. I sat frozen, every word slicing through me. I can't live like this, she continued. I want stability. I want to feel safe, and right now, I don't. My hands clenched. I wanted to scream, to beg, to demand answers. But instead, I just asked, "So what now?" She looked down, then back at me. "I'm moving out tomorrow." I blinked, just like that. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was done. I should have been furious. I should have thrown something, broken something, told her she'd regret this. But all I felt was emptiness, the kind that sets in when you realize someone gave up on you a long time ago and you were the only one who didn't notice. She left the next morning, didn't say goodbye, just left a short note on the kitchen counter. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I'm sorry it couldn't be with me." I didn't cry. I didn't chase her. I just sat at that same kitchen table where we once talked about baby names and vacation dreams and laughed over frozen pizza like it was fine dining. And for the first time since I lost my job, I realized I wasn't broke because of money. I was broke because I gave everything to someone who walked away the second things got hard. And that realization, that was the start of everything. After she left, the silence in my apartment became a living thing. It breathed, it pulsed, it filled every corner of the space we used to share. Her toothbrush was gone, her coat was missing from the hook, the tiny cactus she used to talk to every morning had disappeared from the windowsill. All that remained was the echo of everything we planned. Plans now abandoned, scattered like ashes in the wind. I didn't move for hours that day. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the blank space where her pillow used to be. My heart felt like a crumpled receipt, something once useful, now discarded. But beneath the devastation, something else stirred. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. I had hit rock bottom, and there was no further to fall. I'd lost my job, my fiancée, and the future I thought I was building. But for the first time in a long while, I saw everything clearly. No illusions, no wishful thinking, just the truth. She had walked out on me, not because of a single bad moment, but because when faced with the uncomfortable reality of building something from the ground up, she chose the nearest exit. And maybe that meant she was never really mine to begin with. I gave myself that day to mourn, just one. I let the sadness come in waves, let the questions rise and fall. What could I have done differently? Should I have warned her, pushed harder, tried less? None of it mattered. She was gone. That was final. The next morning, I got up, made coffee, and sat at my desk. I opened the folder labeled Project Ember. That was the name of the startup I had been quietly sketching out for years. It had lived in notebooks, napkins, half-written code, and what-if conversations. She had heard me talk about it, even encourage me in the beginning, but she never believed in it enough to wait. But I did. I always had. So I started building. Piece by piece, line by line, no investors, no hype. Just me, my laptop, and the silence she left behind. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it online. I didn't try to prove her wrong. That wasn't the point. I wasn't building it to make a statement. I was building it to save myself. Every hour I worked on the platform, I felt a little more like me. The real me, the one who used to dream without fear, the one who believed success wasn't something handed down, but carved out with bare hands and blistered fingers. I lived cheap, cheaper than before. I sold old furniture, picked up freelance gigs at night, and skipped every luxury, even coffee shop visits. My apartment felt colder, smaller, but it was mine. And every late night fueled by noodles and stale air was another step forward. Every small victory, fixing a bug, getting a prototype to run, solving a design flaw, was a reminder I wasn't done. People underestimate what solitude can do for you. Without distractions, without anyone to impress, I found a rhythm. Wake, work, eat, build, sleep, repeat. Weeks turned into months. My code grew. So did my confidence. I applied for a small grant. Got it, just $5,000, but enough to hire a part-time developer. I stayed anonymous. No LinkedIn updates, no grand announcements. I kept building like no one was watching, because they weren't. And that was fine. The only person who needed to believe in me finally did. Me. They say grief is the price we pay for love. But in my case, grief became the fuel for something greater. After she left, I disappeared from the world. Not physically, but emotionally. I stopped answering texts that weren't essential. I stopped explaining where I was or what I was doing. No one truly noticed. When you're broke and heartbroken, the world rarely slows down to check on you. But that was fine. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted focus. and I had it. Project Ember had started as an idea, just notes and wild hopes on paper. But over the course of 6 months, it transformed into something real. A software-as-a-service platform for small businesses to manage client outreach, automate simple marketing tasks, and do it all with an intuitive interface that even a tech-averse mom-and-pop shop could understand. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't flashy, but it solved a problem, and I was building it alone. I spent my days buried in code, UI mockups, API documentation, and user testing. My nights were consumed by spreadsheets, pitch decks, and analyzing competitor gaps. I wore the same hoodie for a week straight. My meals were simple: eggs, rice, canned beans, and I drank more instant coffee than I care to admit. But every single day, the platform improved. No one clapped. No one validated me. I didn't post about the grind, didn't humble brag on social media. It was just me and the quiet, and a vision too stubborn to die. Around month 7, I got my first beta tester. A friend of a friend, someone who ran a tiny online candle shop, needed help organizing email orders and follow-ups. I gave her a free login. A week later, she sent me a message that nearly made me cry. This saved me hours. You have no idea how much easier this made my life. That was it. One sentence, but it meant everything. Because for the first time, someone outside of me believed in what I was building. That tiny vote of confidence lit a fire in me that hadn't burned since before she left. I pushed harder, cleaned up the codebase, added features, polished the front end, made it sleek but minimal. Something that looked simple but was powerful underneath. I applied to an accelerator program, unsure if I'd even get an interview. I got in. 3 months of free workspace, mentorship, and access to angel investors. I was one of 12 projects accepted. Most of them had teams. I was still solo. I remember walking into the first group session, surrounded by people in designer sneakers and startup hoodies with logos I didn't recognize, thinking, I don't belong here. But by the end of the 3rd week, I realized something. I absolutely belonged. Because while they were still pitching and refining their idea decks, I already had a working product. Clients, feedback, results. Investors started to notice. I didn't chase them. I let them come to me. By the time demo day rolled around, I had 5 paying customers, a functioning MVP, and a pitch that I had rehearsed so many times I could deliver it in my sleep. I walked onto the stage in a wrinkled shirt, hands slightly shaking, and told them the truth. That I was once broke, that I'd built this with no funding, no team, no fancy office, just silence and resolve. That I wasn't here to make noise. I was here to solve a problem. That's it. I got 3 funding offers that night. I accepted the smallest one with the investor who didn't try to impress me, who just said, "You remind me of how I started." It wasn't about money. It was about alignment, and with that first check, I incorporated the business. I hired 2 contractors to help me scale. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with better lighting, a real desk, and a kitchen that didn't leak. But I still didn't tell anyone, not yet, not even her, because I knew one day she'd find out, but it wouldn't be from me. It would be from the world she thought I'd never be part of. There's a kind of freedom in being invisible. While others bragged on LinkedIn and curated glossy versions of their lives, I kept quiet. No posts, no tweets, no subtle flexes. I didn't need attention, I needed progress. And that's exactly what I got. By month 10, my platform had over 30 paying clients. Small businesses mostly, freelancers, Etsy sellers, service providers with no time to manage email flows or follow-ups. But they paid, and more importantly, they stayed. I built relationships. I listened, I adapted, I turned down 2 more funding offers. Not because I was arrogant, but because I didn't need the cash. The business was growing fast, but sustainably, and I'd learned something vital. When you build in silence, you control the story. You owe nothing to anyone but your mission. I upgraded to a modest office space. Just 1 room, a desk, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard. I worked there alone most days, but sometimes a contractor or intern would drop in. They didn't know my past. They didn't know how far I'd come. They just saw a focused founder, building something real. That anonymity gave me power. It also kept the ghosts of my past from interfering, until one day I opened my inbox and saw her name. It wasn't a long message. "Hey, I saw your name in a business article. Just wanted to say congrats. Looks like you've come a long way." Would love to catch up sometime. No pressure. I stared at the screen for a long time. She had no idea. She didn't know the late nights, the rejections, the nights I ate canned tuna and cold rice because that's all I had. The humiliation of watching her walk away without looking back. And now she wanted to catch up. I didn't reply. Not immediately. I needed time to think, not about what to say, but what I wanted. It wasn't about revenge. That's too easy, too short-sighted. I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted her to see who I had become without her. 2 days later, I sent back a short message. Hey, thanks. Sure. Let me know when you're free. She responded in minutes. Suggested dinner that weekend. I picked the place, an upscale, discreet restaurant that served quiet luxury instead of loud status. No branding, no influencers, just candlelight and polished service. I arrived 10 minutes early. Wore a suit, not flashy, but sharp. The kind you earn, not borrow. She walked in on time. Same walk, same scent, same eyes, but something was different. She looked nervous. She smiled. Hey, I said, standing to pull out her chair. She sat, tucked her hair behind her ear, like she always used to. You look amazing. You too, we ordered. Small talk followed. Surface-level things. How her job was going. How she'd moved apartments. Started reading more. I listened, nodded, responded politely. She didn't ask what happened after she left. She didn't ask about the company until dessert. She set down her spoon, looked up, and finally asked, "So, how did all this happen?" I smiled, calm and steady. "I started building the day after you left." Her eyes faltered. "Oh," she said, voice quiet. "You remember that idea I used to talk about?" I continued. It became something, slowly, quietly, but it grew. She looked at me, lips parting, like she wanted to say something, maybe regret, maybe an apology, but no, words came, and I didn't fill the silence. I wanted her to feel it, to sit in the stillness she had once left me in. The check came. I paid without hesitation. She didn't offer to split it. As we stood outside, she hesitated again. "I'm really happy for you," she said. I nodded. "Thanks." Then she said what I knew she would. "I'm glad we reconnected. Maybe we could meet again." I looked at her. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just with truth. Maybe. Then I turned and walked away. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not answers, not validation, not closure. I had already given those things to myself. I thought that dinner would be the end of it. I assumed she'd feel the awkwardness, the weight of everything left unsaid, and quietly fade back into her life, satisfied to have seen what she missed. I had played my role, calm, composed, successful, but not smug. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity, and I'd left with it. But she came back. A week after our dinner, she messaged me again. "I can't stop thinking about you, about that night, about everything. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately. Another part wanted to ignore it and let her sit with the silence she once served me. But a deeper part, the one that had been left behind, with nothing but broken dreams and rent notices, wanted to hear it. So I replied, "Come by the office tomorrow, 3 p.m. She showed up exactly on time. I buzzed her in, watched her step through the door with cautious eyes and a tight-lipped smile. She looked around the room. Exposed brick, whiteboard covered in strategy notes, awards on the shelf, a subtle logo on the wall, Ember Systems. She took a deep breath. "Wow, you built all this?" I nodded. "From scratch." She sat down across from my desk. This wasn't like the dinner. No candles, no casual tone. This was my space, my world, and she knew it. "I owe you an apology," she began. I didn't respond. I let her speak. "I didn't know how to be there for you back then. I panicked. I thought you were going to spiral, and I didn't want to go down with you. I know that sounds selfish, and maybe it is, but at the time, I didn't think you'd bounce back." Honesty. Raw and painful. I kept listening. I was wrong. About everything. I've been watching from a distance. Articles, interviews, your name just started popping up. And then I saw you in that video from the accelerator, pitching. You looked confident, like a completely different person. I nodded again. Still silent, she continued. "I guess I realized how much I underestimated you, and how much I overestimated myself. Now that landed, I could see it in her eyes, the regret. It was no longer veiled in pride or dressed up in excuses. It sat there, fully exposed. I finally spoke. "You know, when you left, I didn't blame you. Not really. I blame myself. Thought maybe I'd dreamed too big. Maybe love didn't survive bad timing." She bit her lip. "But the truth is, you didn't leave because I failed. You left because I stopped being convenient, and there's a difference. She swallowed hard. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. Not a second chance. Not even forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see you now. Really see you. For a moment, I believed her, but then she added too softly, and maybe we could grab coffee sometime. As friends? There it was. The door she hoped was still open. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and chose my next words carefully. You were the person I thought I'd spend my life with, and for a long time, I hated myself for not being enough. Her eyes welled up. But I've built a life now that doesn't revolve around proving that to anyone. Not even you. I stood. She understood what that meant. She stood too. No hug, no handshake, just a quiet nod. I'm proud of you, she said. I smiled. I know, and she left. This time, I didn't watch her go, because I had nothing left to chase. About a month passed after that meeting in my office. I didn't hear from her again. No texts, no emails, no surprise drop-ins. I thought maybe that was the end, that she'd said her piece and finally accepted what we both knew. We weren't in the same story anymore. But then came the message. I know you said your life doesn't revolve around proving anything anymore, but I still think you deserve to be celebrated. Let me take you to dinner. No pressure, just to thank you for letting me speak my truth. I stared at it for a while. I didn't need the dinner. I didn't need her attention. But something about the offer intrigued me, not because I wanted to rekindle anything, but because I wanted to see how far I'd come through someone else's eyes. So I said yes. This time, I picked the location very intentionally. A private dining room at one of the most exclusive spots in the city. Reservation only, minimalist interior, muted lighting, deep leather chairs, soft jazz echoing from a corner speaker, the kind of place you don't stumble into. You arrive. I greeted her at the entrance. She looked stunned, not just by the place, but by how I looked. Tailored suit, calm presence, no tension in my posture, no indecision in my eyes. I had grown into this skin, and it showed. Wow, she said, stepping inside. This is incredible. I like it quiet, I said. You get to hear everything clearly. We sat, ordered drinks, and made light conversation, while the first course came. She complimented the room, the food, the wine list, but I could see it in her eyes. She was holding something back. Then came the slip. I always knew you had potential. I paused, fork in hand. Did you? I asked softly, setting it down. She blinked, then stammered. I mean, yeah, I did. I just didn't know if you'd make it without you. She fell quiet. I leaned in slightly, not with aggression, but with precision. You left when I was at my worst. Not because you were cruel, but because you didn't believe I could survive it. That's okay. But let's not rewrite it. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The second course came, and we ate in silence for a few minutes. Then she spoke again. I think part of me hoped that maybe, seeing you again, reconnecting, maybe we'd... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The intention hung heavy in the air. A return, a second chance, a do-over. But this wasn't a story that needed rewriting. It needed finishing. You're not a villain, I said. You did what you thought was right for you. And honestly, if you hadn't left, I might not have pushed myself the way I did. She smiled faintly. Then maybe I helped after all. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, I said. You just revealed the weight I couldn't carry anymore. The final course arrived. She barely touched it. By the end of the night, her face told the whole story. This wasn't the dinner she expected. She had walked in thinking maybe there was something left to salvage. But there wasn't. When the check came, I paid without a word. She offered to split, out of reflex maybe, but I waved it off. I wasn't proving anything. I was just closing a chapter. As we stepped outside, she stood under the soft glow of the streetlights. Her arms folded like she was trying to hold herself together. I don't know what I expected, she said quietly. Maybe you expected the version of me that still needed your approval. A pause. And maybe that version died the night you left. Her eyes filled. She nodded slowly. You're different now. I'm not different, I said. I'm finally who I always was. You just couldn't wait long enough to see it. And with that, I turned and walked away. That dinner, she'll never forget it. Not because it was cruel, but because it was final. A few days after that dinner, I received a message from her. Short, quiet, thank you for dinner. You didn't have to, but it meant more than you know. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. I just knew there was nothing else to say. Nothing else I owed. The curtain had closed, and I was already halfway into a life she would never be part of. but the universe has a strange sense of timing. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a private investor summit, an event that featured founders whose companies were quietly disrupting their industries. I wasn't the headliner, but I was the story the press liked to quote: the solo builder, the dropout CEO, the man who went from broke to acquisition ready in under 2 years. I almost declined, but something told me to go, and I'm glad I did, because the moment I walked onto that rooftop garden stage, standing under a golden skyline, I spotted her. She wasn't front row, just near enough to see me, near enough to hear every word. I didn't break stride. I didn't falter. I delivered my pitch with calm conviction. Talked about the early days, the long nights, the quiet rooms where no one was watching. I didn't mention names, never shared details, but when I said, some people leave when your dream still lives on paper, let them, I saw her flinch. The crowd applauded. I left the stage, shaking hands, taking photos, answering questions. And then I saw her standing to the side, half hidden, unsure whether she should approach. This time, I walked over. "Hey," I said. She smiled, sheepish. "You were incredible. Thanks. You've really made it." "I'm just getting started," I replied. She nodded. "I had no idea how far you'd come." "That's the thing," I said. "You weren't supposed to." Her eyes searched mine. "Do you ever think about what we could have been?" "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but then I remember what we were." She lowered her gaze. "I don't want to be a distraction," she added. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not believing in you, for walking away." "I know," I said. And then I did something she didn't expect. I hugged her, not out of romance, not to spark anything, but to release it all. She melted into it for a moment, then stepped back. "I hope you find someone who sees you the whole way through," she whispered. I smiled. I already did, and then I turned and walked back to the people who saw me, not as someone broken or abandoned, but as someone who built. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. It was a photo of us from years ago, sitting on a park bench, her hand in mine, my arm around her shoulder. No caption, just that image. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it, because the man in that photo didn't exist anymore. And I wasn't going back to find him. It's strange how closure doesn't come when you want it. It doesn't show up neatly packaged with an apology or a final conversation. Closure comes quietly, on your own terms, and sometimes it looks nothing like what you expected. After I deleted that photo, I sat in my living room alone. No music, no phone, just me, the soft hum of the city beyond my window, and the quiet realization that I was finally, truly free. Not from her, but from the need for her to see me, to validate me, to understand me. I didn't need any of it anymore. The journey had reshaped me, not just my career or my finances, but the core of who I was. The man she left behind was fueled by uncertainty and desperation. The man I became moved with clarity and purpose. She had been a part of my story, but she wasn't the story. I used to think success would feel like champagne and flashing lights. But what it really felt like was peace. It was saying no without guilt. It was sleeping through the night without wondering if someone was going to walk out again. It was knowing I could lose everything tomorrow and still be me. I didn't stop building after that. I scaled the business, hired people with the same hunger I once had, spoke at more events, mentored founders who reminded me of myself. I even started working on a second venture, this time with a small team I trusted who had stood by me, not because they had to, but because they believed in the vision. And yes, I started seeing someone new. Her name was Elise. We met at a tech conference. She didn't care about my pitch deck or my revenue stream. She asked about the books I read, the places I found peace, what I thought about the silence between songs. It was different. It was honest. She didn't want the version of me who had made it. She wanted the version who still asked questions, who still stumbled, who didn't pretend to be perfect. And that's how I knew. Because when someone loves the unfinished parts of you, you don't have to fear falling. One day, Elise and I were walking through a park. The same park, actually, the one where I'd proposed years ago, broke and hopeful. I told her the story, every detail, not to make her jealous, not to compare, just to show her how far I'd come. She listened carefully, without interruption. Then she said something I'll never forget. She didn't leave because you were lost. She left because she couldn't see where you were going. And that's not your fault. I smiled. She was right. Some people don't have the patience to walk beside you when the path is unfinished. But that doesn't mean you were on the wrong road. You just had to walk it alone for a while, And now, every step I take is mine. No bitterness, no baggage, just footprints on solid ground. Because I'm not who I was, and I don't need to prove that to anyone, especially not her.